They say I was born from fear, but that's not the full story. I was forged in the silence after gunfire, when the ashes of empires still floated in the air. When Europe lay fractured, bone-deep scars hidden under marble smiles. When the world had seen what happens when you leave wolves to sort out peace. It wasn't just war that created me. It was the memory of war, the trembling of hands signing treaties they knew would not hold. April 4th, 1949, my first breath. 12 nations came together not to declare war, but to promise each other they wouldn't fall alone. I was not a sword, I was a shield, raised high, gleaming, righteous. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, an alliance, they called me. A pact of democracies, a deterrent, a guardian of peace. But peace, it turns out, is a complicated thing because peace demands power, power demands structure, structure breeds control, and control always tempts empire. I was not supposed to be an empire. I was supposed to be a promise, a line in the sand, a line no enemy would dare cross. Yet here I stand, decades later, expanding, evolving, consuming. Did I protect the free world, or did I become its quiet occupier? Some call me obsolete, some call me necessary, but few ask the most important question. What am I now? And who decides what I protect? Asterisk, they told me I had one. 1991, the hammer and sickle fell from the Kremlin. The Berlin Wall crumbled like a rotted tooth. The Cold War over the Soviet Union dissolved. And me, still standing, still armored, still armed, but the enemy I was created to contain was gone. So I stood in the mirror and whispered to myself, now what? For a moment, the world was quiet, too quiet, and I didn't know how to live without fear. I watched Eastern Europe tremble in the vacuum. New democracies, old resentments, ethnic firestorms, waiting for a match. So I stepped in. Bosnia, Kosovo, my first war, my first bombs, my first mistakes. I became the peacekeeper who had never known peace. The surgeon with blood still fresh on the gloves. They said, NATO has a new purpose, humanitarian intervention. They praised me, but I knew, you don't repurpose a tank into a hospital bed. Then came Afghanistan, they said. We must invoke Article 5, attack on one is an attack on all, and for the first time in my life, I became global. Mountains, sand, land I was never meant to step on, enemies I barely understood, allies who didn't know why they were dying. 2 decades, $2 trillion, 20 years of silence, gunfire, and groundless pride, and when it ended, I left behind graves, grief, nothing else. Still, I survived. I am NATO, I survive, but I ask myself, did I keep the world safe, or did I just make sure the war never ended? Because every time peace peeks its head above the trenches, I build a new base. I conduct new drills. I push a little further east. Does it defense, or is it expansion by another name? Asterisk. Just when I thought the story was over, the ghost returned. 2014, Crimea. A pen stroke, a flag change, a border redrawn by force. Putin moved like a man testing my pulse just to see if the shield still worked, and I felt it, the old tremor. The Cold War's shadow stretching again across the map. He claimed I was creeping too close, that I had broken promises, that my eastward march had provoked the bear. Perhaps he wasn't entirely wrong, but was I supposed to just sit still, watch the newly freed nations beg for shelter, and tell them no? Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, should I have left them to history's mercy? No, I am a guardian. I open my gates to the afraid, but every new flag that flies beside mine brings me closer to the edge of his patience. Ukraine wasn't mine, not officially, but she danced too close, dreamed too big. And Putin, he doesn't tolerate dreams he can't control. 2022 *, tanks rolled, cities burned, and the world asked, where is NATO now? I stood back, not because I feared him, but because I knew, one wrong step, and the world goes nuclear. So I sent weapons, not soldiers, trained troops, not armies, shared intel, not blood. Some call it cowardice. I call it containment. Because if I go in, if one of my stars bleeds under his bombs, Article 5 ignites, and then it's no longer about Ukraine, then it's about survival, not of a nation but of civilization itself. And yet, I see the line blurring. Proxy becomes direct, assistance becomes involvement. Every day the temperature rises, and I wonder how many more steps before no one can step back. Asterisk. They used to say I was the shield of freedom, the sentinel in the dark, a force of balance, never conquest. But somewhere along the line, the world stopped cheering and started asking questions. Why do your bases remain long after the war is over? Why does your presence feel less like protection and more like occupation? Why do nations bend, not out of love but fear of what happens if they say no? I hear these whispers, they echo through halls I built. They slip between handshakes and joint exercises. And sometimes, just sometimes even, I wonder, am I still defending democracy or enforcing allegiance? I see the double standards. I arm one side, condemn the other. I speak of peace, yet profit from tension. Libya, a country reduced to fragments beneath my bombs. Was that humanitarian aid or geopolitical theater? Yugoslavia, civil war wrapped in moral packaging. I dropped missiles on Belgrade while preaching unity. I tell the world I act in defense, but I never leave. I say I don't seek expansion, yet I grow. They call me a defensive alliance, but my hands are stained with offensive truths. I accuse Russia of spheres of influence, while maintaining mine from Greenland to Georgia and China. Yes, even now, I extend my gaze eastward. New theaters, new threats, new justifications. But the truth is, every empire says it isn't one, until it collapses, and I wonder, am I still the shield of the free world? Or have I become something worse, a self-justifying leviathan too big to question, too sacred to dismantle, a god no one elected? But all must obey. There was a time when the world tilted in my direction, when leaders paused before speaking, just to make sure I wouldn't be offended. But that world is slipping away. Generation, they don't worship flags. They don't salute alliances. They question everything, especially me. They ask, why does peace need so many war games? Why does security feel like surveillance? Why does NATO always sound like it's preparing for war even in times of peace? The new world laughs in languages I didn't learn. India says, we're not your satellite. Brazil asks, what have you done for the global south? Africa builds its own coalitions, while I still cling to Cold War choreography. And then, there's China. Silent, calculated, building alliances of its own, not with tanks, but trade, not with missiles, but memory, that its belt and road winds across continents like a whisper I can't stop. And while I hold military drills in the Pacific, they build ports, roads, futures. Russia, too wounded but not dead. Every sanction I drop, it survives. Every line I draw, it tests. And the worst part, even inside my walls, I feel the fractures. Hungary flirts with autocracy. Turkey plays both sides. France dreams of independence. America, my anchor, grows weary of being my engine. How long can I command when my own members question my purpose? I am NATO, built on unity, but what happens when that unity is only a memory? When my name no longer inspires awe but exhaustion? I was made for yesterday's world, but the world refuses to stay still. Do you know what it feels like to outlive your enemies, only to become a relic? The Soviet Union is gone, the Warsaw Pact dissolved, communism faded, but I remained, and in the silence that followed I became the echo. They say I won the Cold War, but maybe it just ended before I could lose. I was made to be a guardian, a deterrent, a force of restraint. But now, I drift, no declaration of war, no front line to defend, just shadows to chase, and allies who remember less and less why they need me. I expand into the east, but each step feels more like provocation than protection. I surround threats only to create them. I project strength, but beneath my medals is fatigue. Even my victories now carry a cost too heavy to celebrate. Libya, Afghanistan, Kosovo, names I carved into the world, but did I leave them safer, or just scarred? I see the future now, fractured, fast, and unforgiving. Wars waged in cyber silence. Empires built with code and credit. What is a military alliance to do in a war of algorithms? What use is a tank against a collapsing currency? The enemies of tomorrow don't fly flags, they don't sign treaties, they don't fear bombs, they fear nothing. And I, the grand alliance of generals and generals' ghosts, am becoming invisible, not because I fell, but because the world learned to live without me. So, here I stand. A ghost in polished armor. Still rehearsing old speeches. Still running drills in a world that's already changed the script. Maybe this is what all empires become. Not defeated, just forgotten.